The strangest thing about that mansion was not the billionaire who owned it. It was the girl who was never supposed to be there. On a chilly Monday morning in Connecticut, Emily Carter stood outside the massive iron gates of Whitmore Estate, gripping a folder with both hands. Her stomach twisted with nerves as she stared at the sprawling mansion beyond the entrance. The estate looked more like a luxury resort than a private home. Tall stone walls stretched across acres of perfectly maintained grounds. Elegant fountains sparkled beneath the morning sun. Luxury vehicles lined a circular driveway that seemed longer than most streets in her hometown. Emily took a deep breath. She was not supposed to be here. The job belonged to her older sister, Sarah. For nearly 3 years, Sarah had worked as part of the estate staff. But after developing a serious case of pneumonia, she had been ordered by her doctor to remain home for several weeks. The staffing agency had agreed to let Emily temporarily replace her. It was only supposed to be a short assignment. A few weeks, maybe a month. Then she would return to her normal life. At least that was the plan. As the gates slowly opened, Emily walked forward carrying a small duffel bag. She silently repeated every piece of advice her sister had given her. Be polite. Work hard. Stay out of trouble. Follow instructions. Do not draw attention to yourself. The last rule seemed easy enough. Emily had spent most of her life avoiding attention. Inside the mansion, activity buzzed in every direction. Housekeepers moved efficiently through hallways. Groundskeepers maintained gardens visible through enormous windows. Kitchen staff prepared meals with military precision. Everything operated like a carefully choreographed performance. Emily quickly realized she was the least experienced person there. A stern woman in her late 50s approached her. You must be the replacement, she said. Emily Carter? Emily nodded. Yes, ma'am. I am Victoria Langford. I oversee household operations. Emily immediately recognized authority in her voice. Victoria looked her up and down with obvious skepticism. Try not to create extra work for anyone. Emily forced a smile. I will do my best. Victoria did not smile back. Within an hour, Emily was carrying supplies through unfamiliar hallways while trying desperately not to get lost. Every room seemed larger than the last. Crystal chandeliers hung overhead. Expensive artwork covered the walls. Everything felt intimidating. Near lunchtime, Emily found herself searching for a storage room on the second floor. After making 2 wrong turns, she accidentally opened a door leading into a quiet private library. Sunlight streamed through tall windows. Thousands of books filled floor-to-ceiling shelves. The room felt untouched by time. Emily stepped inside only long enough to confirm she was in the wrong place. Then she heard a faint metallic sound. Curious, she followed it toward a small table near the window. Resting there was an old wooden music box. The lid sat slightly crooked. One of the hinges appeared loose. Emily gently touched it. The mechanism clicked weakly before falling silent. She frowned. Her father had repaired antique furniture for years before he passed away. Growing up, Emily had spent countless weekends helping him fix broken items. Instinctively, she adjusted the loose hinge and carefully repositioned a tiny metal pin inside the mechanism. A second later, soft music filled the room. Emily smiled. There you go. Unaware of the hidden security camera quietly observing the library, she closed the lid and walked away. Several floors above, inside a private office overlooking the estate, Ryan Whitmore paused while reviewing reports. The security monitor displayed the library. He stared at the screen as the young woman exited the room. Then his gaze shifted toward the music box that had not worked properly in years. For the first time all morning, the billionaire CEO stopped working and paid attention. The rest of Emily's first day passed in a blur of unfamiliar routines and endless tasks. Yet while she focused on learning the estate's procedures, she had no idea someone else was paying close attention. From his private office overlooking the property, Ryan Whitmore replayed the security footage from the library twice. Not because the repair itself was remarkable, but because of how casually she had done it. She had not called for recognition. She had not told anyone. She had simply fixed something broken and moved on. That alone made her different from most people he encountered. The following morning, Emily arrived before sunrise. She wanted to make a good impression and avoid giving Victoria any reason to criticize her. The mansion was quiet at that hour. Soft light filtered through tall windows as she began preparing several guest rooms for a family gathering scheduled later that week. Around mid-morning, while changing linens in one of the suites, She noticed a diamond bracelet resting beneath a chair near the window. Even from a distance, she could tell it was expensive. For a brief moment, she simply stared at it. Then she carefully picked it up and headed downstairs. After asking several staff members, she eventually located Victoria. "I found this upstairs," Emily said, handing over the bracelet. Victoria examined it and immediately recognized the piece. Her expression briefly changed before returning to its usual stern appearance. "This belongs to a guest." Emily smiled. "I figured somebody would be looking for it." Victoria nodded stiffly and walked away. Emily returned to work without another thought. Less than an hour later, Ryan received a report from Victoria about the missing bracelet. The billionaire leaned back in his chair thoughtfully. Most people would have returned it. But what interested him was the fact that Emily had never asked about its value. She had not even seemed curious. Throughout the afternoon, another small incident caught his attention. One of the older kitchen employees accidentally dropped a heavy box while carrying supplies. Before anyone else reacted, Emily rushed over and helped gather everything scattered across the floor. She spent nearly 20 minutes assisting the woman, even though the task had nothing to do with her assigned responsibilities. Again, she expected nothing in return. Again, she never realized anyone had noticed. Late that evening, after most staff members had finished for the day, Emily found herself lost once more while trying to return cleaning supplies. She turned a corner and nearly collided with a tall man carrying several folders. "Sorry," she said quickly. The man smiled. "I think that hallway gets everyone at least once." Emily laughed nervously. "That is good to know." He appeared to be in his early 30s. Well-dressed, but not overly formal. Friendly. Calm. "New here?" he asked. "Temporary replacement," Emily replied. "My sister normally works here." The man nodded. "How is it going so far?" Emily looked around at the enormous mansion. "Honestly, I am still trying to figure out where everything is." The stranger laughed. "That makes two of us." They exchanged a few more words before continuing in opposite directions. Emily never thought about the encounter again. But as Ryan Whitmore walked away, he found himself smiling. For the first time in years, someone inside his mansion had spoken to him without knowing exactly who he was. Over the next several days, Emily slowly settled into life at Whitmore Estate. The mansion no longer felt quite as overwhelming as it had during her first morning. She still occasionally took wrong turns in the endless hallways, but she was beginning to recognize familiar faces and routines. What she did not realize was that her reputation among the staff was quietly growing. Not because she tried to impress anyone, but because she consistently treated every person with the same kindness and respect. One rainy afternoon, Emily was assigned to organize several storage rooms near the west wing of the mansion. The task was tedious, but she welcomed it. While sorting through shelves filled with old household items, she noticed one of the younger employees struggling to move a heavy cart loaded with supplies. Without hesitation, she stepped over to help. Together they finished the task in half the time. The employee thanked her repeatedly. Emily simply smiled and continued working. To her, helping someone was never something that deserved recognition. Later that day, she passed through the kitchen and found the head chef looking frustrated. A large dinner event was scheduled for the weekend, and several deliveries had arrived damaged. Emily spent nearly an hour assisting the kitchen staff, even though she was already finished with her own assignments. By the end of the evening, everyone in the kitchen seemed grateful for the extra help. Upstairs, Ryan received another routine report from Victoria. Most of the updates focused on preparations for the upcoming event. Yet one detail stood out. Emily's name appeared repeatedly. She had helped the kitchen, assisted maintenance staff, covered shifts for another employee whose child was sick. Ryan found himself smiling despite trying not to. He had spent years surrounded by people who carefully calculated every action based on what they might gain. Emily appeared completely different. She acted the same way whether anyone was watching or not. The following morning, Ryan decided to conduct a small test. Nothing dramatic, nothing unfair. During breakfast preparations, a leather wallet containing several $100s in cash was intentionally left in a sitting room that staff frequently used. Ryan observed quietly through a security monitor. Several employees passed through the room without noticing it. Eventually, Emily entered carrying fresh linens. She immediately spotted the wallet. She picked it up, looked around, and then headed directly toward the administrative office. Less than 10 minutes later, She handed it over without counting the money or asking any questions. Ryan leaned back in his chair. The result was exactly what he expected. Yet somehow he still felt impressed. That evening, Emily returned to the library while dusting shelves. As she worked, her attention drifted toward the old music box she had repaired days earlier. Curious, she carefully opened the lid. The gentle melody filled the room once again. A small smile appeared on her face. She had no idea the music box belonged to Ryan's late mother. She had no idea that fixing it had touched something deeply personal. And she certainly had no idea that, from another room, the billionaire owner of the estate was once again watching her on a monitor and beginning to wonder why a temporary employee occupied so many of his thoughts. By the second week, Emily had become one of the few people inside Whitmore Estate who seemed completely comfortable being herself. She greeted the groundskeepers with the same warmth she showed the senior staff. She thanked kitchen employees for every meal. She listened when people spoke. Small things, simple things, yet somehow they stood out in a place where most interactions felt carefully measured. One afternoon, while helping organize decorations for the upcoming family gathering, Emily noticed an elderly maintenance worker struggling to carry several storage boxes across the courtyard. Without hesitation, she set down her own supplies and hurried over. "Let me help," she said. The man smiled gratefully. Together, they carried the boxes into a nearby building. During the walk, Emily learned that he had worked at the estate for nearly 20 years. Most people passed him every day without knowing his name. Emily asked questions, listened to his stories, and thanked him for sharing them. Later, after she returned to her duties, the maintenance worker could not stop talking about the conversation. Word traveled quickly through the staff. Upstairs, Ryan received another report. Once again, Emily's name appeared. Once again, she had done something kind without expecting recognition. The more Ryan learned about her, the more difficult it became to treat her as just another employee. Yet he continued hiding his identity. Part of him wanted to know whether her behavior would remain unchanged if she knew who he really was. That evening, preparations for the family event intensified. Relatives, business associates, and guests would begin arriving within days. Victoria moved through the mansion issuing instructions with military precision. Everyone seemed stressed except Emily. While arranging flowers in one of the reception rooms, she accidentally overheard two employees arguing. One had made a mistake with inventory records and feared losing his position. Emily quietly stepped in and spent nearly an hour helping him locate the missing paperwork. By the end of the evening, the problem was solved. Nobody outside the room ever knew what happened. Ryan did. He had watched the entire situation unfold through internal reports and staff feedback. The pattern was becoming impossible to ignore. Emily consistently chose the harder path whenever it helped someone else. The next morning, Ryan deliberately crossed paths with her in the hallway again. "Still getting lost?" he asked with a smile. Emily laughed. "Only 3 times today. That sounds like progress. At this rate, I might know where I am by Christmas." Ryan found himself laughing harder than he expected. Their conversation lasted only a few minutes before work pulled them apart. Yet afterward, Emily noticed something strange. Talking to him felt easy, comfortable. She still assumed he was a manager or consultant working somewhere within the estate. She had no reason to suspect anything more. As the day ended, Emily returned briefly to the library. The music box sat exactly where she remembered. She opened the lid and listened to the familiar melody fill the room. The sound brought an unexpected sense of peace. Unaware that the melody carried memories of Ryan's late mother. Unaware that the billionaire himself had paused outside the library door and quietly listened from the hallway. And completely unaware that the more he observed her, the more his carefully guarded world was beginning to change. As the weekend approached, Whitmore Estate transformed into a place of constant activity. Luxury vehicles arrived throughout the day. Staff hurried through hallways making final preparations. Florists decorated reception rooms. Caterers coordinated schedules. Everywhere Emily looked, someone seemed to be rushing toward another task. Yet despite the growing pressure, she remained calm. She focused on her work and treated each assignment with the same care she always had. On Friday afternoon, while helping prepare guest suites, Emily noticed a young housekeeper sitting alone in a service corridor. The woman looked upset. After a brief conversation, Emily learned that her mother had recently been admitted to a hospital and she was struggling to concentrate. Without hesitation, Emily offered to finish several of the woman's assignments so she could leave early. The grateful employee nearly cried. Emily simply smiled and told her to go be with her family. Once again, she expected nothing in return. By now, stories about Emily's kindness had spread throughout the estate. Employees trusted her. Many actively sought her help. The only person who seemed increasingly unhappy about this was Victoria Langford. Every day, Victoria watched Emily earn more respect from the staff. It irritated her. Temporary employees were supposed to blend into the background, not become popular. Meanwhile, Ryan found himself looking forward to every unexpected encounter with Emily. Over the past 2 weeks, he had learned more about her through observation than most people revealed in years. She never changed her behavior based on who was present. Whether she spoke to a groundskeeper or a senior manager, her kindness remained exactly the same. That consistency fascinated him. Late that evening, Ryan encountered Emily in the library once again. She stood near the shelves, organizing several books that had been misplaced. The music box rested nearby. "You spend a lot of time in here," Ryan said as he entered. Emily smiled. "It is my favorite room." "Because of the books?" Ryan asked. Emily glanced toward the window. "Partly. It is peaceful. Most rooms in this mansion feel expensive. This room feels personal." Ryan studied her expression. Few people understood the difference. "I think you might be right." Emily carefully closed the music box after listening to a few notes. Whoever owned this must have loved it. Ryan looked at the small wooden box. Memories of his mother briefly surfaced. They did. Emily noticed the emotion in his voice, but politely avoided asking questions. Another thing Ryan admired. She respected boundaries without becoming distant. The following day, guests began arriving in large numbers. Expensive suits, designer dresses, and luxury cars filled the estate. Emily worked quietly among them, never appearing intimidated. Several wealthy visitors barely acknowledged staff members. Emily treated everyone with equal courtesy regardless of status. Ryan noticed. So did many others. As evening settled over Whitmore Estate, preparations for the main gathering reached their peak. Emily finished a long shift and stepped outside. For a moment of fresh air, the mansion glowed beneath hundreds of lights. Music drifted from open windows. Looking at the beautiful estate, she felt grateful for the opportunity her sister's illness had unexpectedly created. What she did not know was that somewhere inside the mansion, Victoria had already begun planning a situation that would place Emily at the center of a serious problem. And for the first time since arriving at Whitmore Estate, kindness alone might not be enough to protect her. The main gathering began on Saturday evening. Guests filled the grand ballroom, while soft music echoed through the mansion. Crystal chandeliers illuminated hundreds of smiling faces. Business leaders, investors, relatives, and longtime family friends moved through the crowd exchanging conversations. For the staff, it was one of the busiest nights of the year. Emily spent most of the evening helping coordinate refreshments and assisting guests. Despite the pressure, she remained calm. Several employees quietly admitted they were relieved she was working that night because she always seemed willing to help whenever problems appeared. Meanwhile, Ryan observed everything from a distance. Officially, he was hosting the event. Unofficially, he found himself paying more attention to Emily than to any guest in attendance. Every time he looked across the room, she was helping someone, solving a problem, or making another person's evening easier. What fascinated him most was that she never seemed aware of the impression she was making. Near the end of the event, Victoria finally put her plan into motion. Earlier that afternoon, she had quietly arranged for an expensive antique brooch belonging to one of Ryan's relatives to be placed inside a storage cabinet frequently used by Emily. Her goal was simple: create suspicion, damage Emily's reputation, remind everyone that she was merely a temporary replacement. The opportunity arrived shortly before midnight when the owner of the brooch reported it missing. Within minutes, concern spread throughout the mansion. Staff members were questioned. Storage areas were searched. Guests whispered among themselves. Emily had no idea what was happening until Victoria approached her directly. "We need to inspect your supply cabinet," Victoria announced. Emily blinked in confusion. "My cabinet? What?" Victoria's expression remained cold. "A valuable item has disappeared." Several employees gathered nearby. The atmosphere immediately became uncomfortable. Emily felt dozens of eyes turning toward her. When the cabinet door was opened, the antique brooch was discovered resting inside. The room fell silent. Emily stared at it in complete shock. "I have never seen that before," she said honestly. Victoria folded her arms. "Then perhaps you can explain how it ended up among your supplies." Emily's heart sank. She knew exactly how suspicious the situation looked. Yet she also knew she had done nothing wrong. For the first time since arriving at Whitmore Estate, she found herself without an answer. Around the room, uncertainty spread. Some employees looked confused. Others appeared disappointed. None of them wanted to believe Emily could steal. But the evidence seemed difficult to ignore. Several floors above, Ryan received an urgent message regarding the situation. Within minutes, security footage from multiple areas of the mansion began appearing on monitors inside his office. As he reviewed the reports, one detail immediately bothered him. Nothing about the accusation matched the woman he had spent weeks observing. Emily had returned cash, jewelry, and valuable property without hesitation. She had consistently chosen honesty when nobody was watching. The allegation simply did not fit. Downstairs, Emily stood quietly while questions continued. She felt embarrassed, hurt, and completely blindsided. Yet even then, she refused to become angry. "I did not take it," she said softly. "That is the truth." What she did not know was that, for the first time since she arrived at the estate, Ryan Whitmore had stopped being a silent observer. And before the night was over, everything was about to change. The ballroom remained tense as whispers spread through the crowd. Emily stood near the center of the room, feeling as though the floor had disappeared beneath her feet. She had spent weeks earning trust, yet in a single moment, everything seemed to be slipping away. Victoria maintained her cold expression, while several guests quietly discussed the situation among themselves. Emily could feel the disappointment in some of their eyes. That hurt far more than the accusation itself. She knew she was innocent. The problem was proving it. Then something unexpected happened. The room suddenly grew quiet. Conversation stopped. Heads turned toward the entrance. A tall man stepped into the ballroom with calm confidence. Emily immediately recognized him. It was the friendly employee she had spoken with countless times in hallways, gardens, and the library. Ryan walked forward without hurry. Yet the reaction around him immediately felt different. Guests straightened their posture. Executives nodded respectfully. Even Victoria seemed uncomfortable. Emily looked from face to face, confused by what she was seeing. Ryan stopped beside her. "This situation is over," he said calmly. His voice was not loud, but everyone heard it. Victoria blinked. "Mr. Whitmore." The brooch was found inside her cabinet. Emily froze. "Mr. Whitmore." The name hit her like a wave. Her eyes widened. She looked at Ryan again. The billionaire owner of Whitmore Estate. The CEO whose name appeared in financial magazines. The man every guest seemed eager to impress. The man she had spent weeks casually talking to without the slightest idea who he really was. Ryan met her stunned gaze briefly before turning his attention back to the room. "I reviewed the security footage personally," he said. "The evidence does not support the accusation." A murmur spread through the crowd. Victoria's expression tightened. "There must be some explanation." Ryan nodded. "There is." Within minutes, security staff displayed footage from several cameras positioned throughout the estate. Guests watched silently as the timeline unfolded. The recordings clearly showed that Emily had never entered the storage area with the brooch. They also revealed another figure placing something inside the cabinet hours earlier. Victoria's face gradually lost all color. The room fell silent once the truth became impossible to deny. Emily could barely process what she was watching. Ryan had not only investigated the situation, he had done so immediately, without hesitation, without assuming the worst. Emily Carter has consistently demonstrated honesty, integrity, and professionalism since arriving at this estate, Ryan said. "I will not allow her reputation to be damaged by false accusations." Every word echoed through the ballroom. For the first time, Emily realized that he had been paying attention all along. Not just tonight. For weeks. The revelation left her speechless. Guests who had doubted her moments earlier now looked embarrassed. Several staff members smiled with visible relief. The elderly maintenance worker she once helped nodded proudly from across the room. Victoria quietly stepped back, unable to defend herself. Yet the biggest shock was still unfolding inside Emily's mind. The man she thought was simply another employee was actually the billionaire owner of everything around her. Suddenly, every conversation, every encounter, and every moment they had shared felt different. As the crowd slowly dispersed, Ryan looked toward Emily. Neither spoke. They did not need to. One secret had finally been revealed, and both of them knew that nothing inside Whitmore Estate would ever be the same again. The morning after the gathering felt completely different. Emily woke before sunrise, but for the first time since arriving at Whitmore Estate, she was not thinking about her work schedule. She was thinking about Ryan. More specifically, she was thinking about the truth. The friendly man who had joked with her in hallways, listened to her stories, and shared quiet conversations in the library was not an employee at all. He was Ryan Whitmore, billionaire, CEO, owner of the estate. The realization still felt impossible. Throughout breakfast preparations, Emily noticed subtle changes around her. Staff members greeted her with greater warmth. Several quietly apologized for doubting her the night before. Even guests who had witnessed the accusation offered polite smiles when they passed. Yet despite the support, Emily felt strangely uncomfortable. Everything she thought she understood had suddenly shifted. Around mid-morning, she was arranging books in the library when Ryan appeared in the doorway. For a moment, neither spoke. The familiar ease that once existed between them seemed harder to find. Finally, Ryan broke the silence. "I was hoping we could talk." Emily closed the book in her hands. "About which part?" she asked softly. "The part where you are the billionaire owner of this mansion, or the part where everyone knew except me?" Ryan sighed. He had expected the question. "I never intended to embarrass you." Emily looked down briefly. "Maybe not, but you let me believe you were someone else." Ryan stepped closer. "I never actually lied." Emily could not argue with that. Yet the distinction offered little comfort. "Why?" she asked. Ryan considered the question carefully. "Because every person I meet knows who I am before they know anything else. They see the company, the money, the headlines. They decide who I am before we even have a conversation." He paused. "You did not." Emily remained silent. Ryan continued. "For the first time in years, someone spoke to me like a normal person." The honesty in his voice surprised her. She wanted to stay frustrated. It would have been easier. But she could also remember every conversation they had shared. None of those moments felt fake. By afternoon, the estate had returned to its normal rhythm. Guests departed. Decorations were removed. The excitement of the gathering slowly faded. Yet Emily noticed something else. Ryan no longer stayed hidden. Staff members greeted him openly. Executives arrived for meetings. Luxury vehicles entered the property throughout the day. She finally saw the world he truly belonged to. It felt enormous, complicated, far removed from her own life. Later that evening, Emily stood outside on a stone terrace overlooking the gardens. The sunset painted the sky in shades of gold and orange. She heard footsteps approaching and knew immediately who it was. Ryan joined her beside the railing. Neither spoke for several seconds. Then Emily quietly said, "I do not think people like us belong in the same story." Ryan looked toward the horizon. "That is the problem with stories," he replied. "People spend too much time deciding how they are supposed to end." Emily felt her heart tighten unexpectedly. Yet even as she stood beside him beneath the fading sunlight, a new distance had begun to form between them. The truth had finally been revealed. And now both of them would have to decide whether what existed between them was strong enough to survive it. The days that followed felt strangely different for both of them. Ryan returned to his demanding schedule as CEO, but no matter how many meetings filled his calendar, his thoughts continued drifting back to Emily. Meanwhile, Emily tried convincing herself that nothing had changed. She focused on her responsibilities. She completed every assignment with the same professionalism as before. Yet every time she saw Ryan, she became painfully aware of the distance between their worlds. One afternoon, several black luxury vehicles arrived at Whitmore Estate carrying senior executives from Whitmore Holdings. Among them was Derek Lawson, a longtime executive who had worked alongside Ryan for years. Derek was intelligent, ambitious, and deeply invested in the company's public image. From the moment he arrived, he immediately noticed Emily. More importantly, he noticed the way Ryan looked at her. During a private meeting later that day, Derek addressed the subject directly. "People are talking," he said. Ryan barely looked up from a report. "People always talk." Derek folded his arms. "This is different. Investors pay attention to perception. Board members pay attention to perception. Ryan closed the file in front of him. What exactly are you trying to say? Derek hesitated before answering. You are one of the most recognizable business leaders in the country. If rumors start connecting your name to a temporary estate employee, people will have opinions. Ryan's expression hardened slightly. I do not make personal decisions based on rumors. Derek sighed. That is exactly why I am concerned. The conversation ended there, but the warning remained. Later that evening, Emily witnessed another side of Ryan's life. While delivering documents to an office inside the mansion, she accidentally passed an open conference room where executives were discussing acquisitions worth hundreds of millions of dollars, complex negotiations, international investments, corporate strategies. The conversation sounded like a completely different language. Emily quietly moved on, but the experience stayed with her. For the first time, she truly understood the scale of Ryan's responsibilities. He was not simply wealthy. Entire companies depended on his decisions. Thousands of employees relied on him. The realization made her feel smaller than she wanted to admit. That night, she called her sister Sarah. After listening carefully, Sarah asked a simple question. Do you like him? Emily stared out her bedroom window toward the estate gardens. That is not the problem. Then what is? Emily struggled to answer. Finally, she said, people like him do not end up with people like me. Sarah laughed softly. That sounds like something from a movie made 20 years ago. Emily smiled despite herself. Yet deep down, the doubt remained. The following day, Ryan found Emily organizing books in the library once again. For a few minutes, they worked quietly together. The comfortable conversations they once shared had become more cautious, more careful. Ryan noticed it immediately. You have been avoiding me, he said gently. Emily shook her head. No, Emily. She looked away. I just think I finally understand who you are. Ryan studied her expression. And what does that mean? Emily glanced around the enormous library, the priceless artwork, and the mansion beyond the windows. It means I probably should have remembered that I am only here temporarily. Her words landed harder than she intended. Ryan remained silent for several seconds. Then he looked toward the old music box resting nearby. For the first time since revealing his identity, he realized the greatest challenge was not convincing Emily that he cared about her. It was convincing her that she belonged in his world at all.